Hello everyone, I'm Chris, and this is everything you need to know before watching John Wick Chapter 4, releasing March 24th. If you end up enjoying this video and want to see more from us, then make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to know anytime we upload a new video. Nearly 20 years after meeting on the set of The Matrix, director Chad Stahelski, who worked as Keanu Reeves' stunt double throughout the original Matrix trilogy, reunited with Keanu to create John Wick, which released in theaters back in 2014 and spawned two sequels released in 2017 and 2019 respectively, each of which nearly doubled the previous installment at the box office. And Stahelski and Reeves look to continue the franchise's critical and commercial success with its fourth installment, John Wick Chapter 4. So in preparation for the new film, we're going to take a look back at everything that's gone down so far throughout the first three films, which you should go watch if you haven't already, as they'll be listed in the description so you can enjoy them for yourself before continuing on with our recap. To begin, we're taken through flashbacks in John Wick's memory, in which we see that he'd recently lost his wife Helen to a terminal illness, whose funeral he later attends, and following the ceremony, he receives one final gift prepared for him by Helen, a dog named Daisy. During the two's first day together, John takes Daisy with him on a drive, and while getting some gas, he's approached by Yosef Tarasov, who's taken an interest in his vintage 1969 Ford Mustang, and tries to buy it from him, but John refuses, angering Yosef. So later that night, Tarasov and his associates break into John's home and beat him unconscious, as well as kill his dog, before stealing and driving off in his car, which they take the next morning to Aurelio's illegal chop shop to get a new vehicle identification number and some clean papers for it. But Aurelio instead punches Yosef in the face and refuses to do business with him, later resulting in him receiving a phone call from Yosef's father, Vigo Tarasov, a Russian crime lord. But he quickly understands Aurelio's reaction upon learning that the car Yosef stole was that of John Wick's, who Vigo explains to his son was once an associate of theirs, known by many as Baba Yaga. Until one day, John asked to leave this life to start a new one with his wife. So Vigo, in return for his freedom, gave him an impossible task, and John somehow managed to pull it off, laying the foundation for what the Tarasovs are now, which thanks to Yosef, may all be in jeopardy. So Vigo attempts to strike first and sends a crew to assassinate John at his home, but John, unsurprisingly, kills all 13 men in under 3 minutes. So Vigo next puts a contract worth $2 million up for his assassination, before then meeting with John's mentor, Marcus, to offer him the job of killing John personally, and he seemingly accepts. John, meanwhile, has made his way to the Continental Hotel in New York City, inside of which there are rules in place that prohibits fighting, assassinations, or any business of that nature being conducted on Continental grounds. And here he meets with the hotel's owner, Winston, hoping he'll tell him where to find Yosef, and he informs him that Yosef's currently at the Red Circle nightclub. So John rushes over to said nightclub and promptly kills 28 of the Tarasov's men, as Yosef attempts to make a run for it. But before he can reach Yosef, John's heavily wounded in a shootout and subsequent brawl with Kirill, Vigo's head of security, so he's forced to run to the Continental, where he receives treatment from their doctor and rests up for the night back in his room. While he's resting though, a fellow assassin, Miss Perkins, who had earlier made an agreement with Vigo to break the Continental's rules for double John's original $2 million contract, enters the room and prepares to kill him. But fortunately, John's tipped off of her arrival by Marcus, who fires a sniper through the window from a rooftop across the street to warn him, and John's able to gain the upper hand against her, eventually holding her at gunpoint and forcing her to give him something on the Tarasovs, with her revealing that there's a church in Little Russia where Vigo keeps his private stash of money, before he then knocks her out and leaves her with another fellow assassin, Harry, although she eventually manages to break free of her restraints, kill Harry, and exit the hotel. John, though, then heads to the church the next morning and kills Vigo's associates in attendance, before having the pastor take him to Vigo's money vault so he can burn all of its contents to ash. And Vigo arrives shortly after upon learning of what happened, which is exactly what John was hoping for, as he guns down 9 more of Vigo's henchmen, but his hunt is eventually disrupted when he's hit by Kirill's car and knocked unconscious. When he awakens, he finds himself tied to a chair, and after some taunting from Vigo, Kirill and another henchman begin strangling him to death with a plastic bag. But once again, John's saved by Marcus, who snipes and kills Kirill's partner, allowing John to break free of Kirill's grasp and engage in a brawl with him, which ultimately comes to an end when John uses his cuffs to snap Kirill's neck. He then manages to catch up to Vigo's vehicle as he attempts to escape and kill his driver, forcing Vigo at gunpoint to pull the contract and reveal Yosef's whereabouts, which John quickly makes his way over to and kills the 19 men guarding Yosef before finally killing Yosef himself. So having done that, he looks to return home, but first he meets with Marcus to thank him for his help. Unfortunately though, unbeknownst to them, Miss Perkins had been watching from afar, so she informs Vigo of what Marcus had done, resulting in him and his men arriving at Marcus's home with Miss Perkins and beating him relentlessly, before he's ultimately shot to death by Vigo. Not too long after Vigo and his men exit the apartment though, Perkins receives a phone call from the Continental's concierge, Sharon, which then leads her to being met by Winston, who informs her that her Continental membership has been revoked, before having his associates shoot and kill her. John, meanwhile, after having learned of Marcus's death from a vengeful Vigo over the phone, soon learns of its current whereabouts from Winston, so he rushes over to its location just as he's about to hop on a helicopter, and kills his last 5 henchmen, forcing Vigo to fight him one-on-one. And John ultimately wins after allowing himself to be stabbed in the stomach so he can break Vigo's arm and using the same knife to stab Vigo in the neck. John then hobbles over to an animal clinic to patch himself up, and after taking a pit bull within the clinic with him, he makes his way back home. 4 days following Vigo's death, John once again unleashes an attack on the Tarasov mob, now headed by Vigo's brother Abram, with him killing or injuring various henchmen to regain possession of his stolen car, which gets pretty banged up throughout the attack, before then confronting Abram to propose a truce, which he accepts. So John drives back home and has Aurelio take the car to his shop as he tries to return to retirement, but that's once again interrupted when he's met at his home by Italian crime lord Santino D'Antonio. It's revealed that in order for John to complete the previously mentioned impossible task, he needed Santino's help. So in return for his aid, John swore to a marker an unbreakable blood oath. And now Santino's come to present John with said marker and ask a favor in return. John declines to help him though, as he no longer wants any part of this life. So in response, Santino blows up his home with a grenade launcher. John then travels to the Continental once again to meet with Winston, hoping he'll tell him where to find Santino. But Winston instead reminds him that if he doesn't honor his marker, he'll be breaking one of the 2 unbreakable rules of the underworld.
You dishonor the marker, you die. You kill the holder of the mark, you die. You run, you die.
So John's ultimately forced to do whatever Santino asks of him, which is to kill his sister Gianna D'Antonio prior to her coronation as a member of the High Table, a council of 12 crime lords that govern the underworld's most powerful organizations, so he can take her place, and John promptly heads to Rome to do just that, eventually managing to infiltrate the D'Antonio estate and confront her in her dressing room once she's all alone. And after explaining how he was sent by Santino as a result of a marker, Gianna, accepting her fate, decides to die her way and slashes her own wrists, leaving John to put her out of her misery when she falls unconscious. But as he goes to exit the building, he's spotted by Gianna's bodyguard, Cassian, who quickly realizes why John's there and fires at him. So John's forced to kill 18 of his men as he escapes underground, but once there, he's then met by a crew of Santino's henchmen looking to tie up loose ends, although they ultimately fail in their mission, as John kills all 45 of them before making it above ground and once again being attacked by Cassian. Their brawl gets interrupted though when they crash through the window of the Rome Continental, so after sharing a drink, they go their separate ways for now. But Cassian and Santino's henchmen are no longer the only ones John needs to worry about, as while he makes his way back to New York, Santino puts a $7 million contract on his life, resulting in various assassins attempting to take him out for the reward, but they all fail in their pursuit and die for their efforts. John's then met once again by Cassian, who he has another shootout and subsequent brawl with, that eventually makes its way onto a train, where John lands a knife stab through Cassian's chest, but ultimately decides against killing him out of respect. These multiple battles heavily wound John though, so he seeks help from an underground crime lord known as the Bowery King, whose men treat John's injuries and to whom John explains that if Santino's not dealt with soon, he'll use his newly acquired power to take over New York, which will lead to war. So the Bowery King agrees to give him underground passage to Santino's location, and once there, John kills another 45 of his subordinates as he chases after Santino, who in the midst of the attack manages to escape to the New York Continental, where he plans on staying for the foreseeable future. So John, once arriving at the hotel as well, shoots him dead in the middle of the lounge, forcing Winston to make him excommunicado from the Continental, and resulting in the High Table doubling Santino's open contract on his life, although Winston's able to delay the contract for 1 hour, and gives John a marker to be used if needed. So with that, John, after having his pitbull sent back to the Continental to be taken care of by Sharon, rushes off to the New York Public Library, inside of which he'd hidden 2 items that he now collects, a crucifix necklace and a marker, before he's then attacked by a fellow assassin, Ernest, just minutes before the contract's put into effect. But he manages to make relatively quick work of the giant. He's soon attacked again though once the contract is opened by various gangs and multiple other assassins, But once again, John manages to kill all 14 of them before meeting with the director, in charge of the Ruska Roma crime organization, and whose supervision he'd trained under as a young man to become the assassin he is today. He now presents her with the cross he'd grabbed earlier, which is a sort of ticket that can only be used once that represents a debt he's owed. So although she doesn't have to, since John's privileges in the underworld have already been revoked, she agrees to help him and gives him safe passage out of New York to Casablanca. Meanwhile, back at the Continental, Winston is met by an adjudicator, an agent of the High Table sent to deal with John Wick and those who've aided him, and she reveals that the High Table will be relieving Winston of his duties as the Continental's manager for not having immediately killed John Wick for breaking their rules, and she gives him 7 days to get his affairs in order, before then meeting with the Bowery King to deal out punishment for him having helped John while Santino's contract on his life was open, with her also giving him 7 days to get his affairs in order. She then meets with another assassin named Zero to personally present him with the job of killing John Wick and dealing with the others that had helped him, and he accepts her offer. So he and his men join her in confronting the director for helping John Wick escape New York, and as punishment for her actions, the adjudicator has Zero shove a blade through the director's hands. They then aid the adjudicator in dealing with the Bowery King for refusing to relinquish his throne, with Zero and his men ambushing and killing many of his subordinates, before the adjudicator has Zero give him 7 slashes for giving John Wick 7 bullets. Moving over to Casablanca now, as John makes his way to the Moroccan Continental, managed by his old friend Sophia Alizwar, to whom he presents the marker he'd grabbed earlier, which we now learn was given to him by Sophia in exchange for his help in hiding her daughter, and he now asks for her to return the favor and bring him to her former boss, Barada, so he can speak with him, and she reluctantly agrees. So the two, along with her 2 dogs, head over to Barada's facility, where he mints the coins we've seen those involved in the underworld uses their form of currency. And John asks where he can find the Elder, the head of the High Table, so he can make amends. And Barada explains that, if he wishes to speak with him, he must journey through the desert until he's on the brink of death, and then maybe the Elder will find him. In return for this information, and for not killing him or Sophia, Barada orders her to gift him one of her dogs, but she refuses, so he shoots it. And although the bullet fortunately didn't penetrate the dog's bulletproof vest, the shot still prompts Sophia to unleash an attack on Barada and his men, which John's forced to take part in as well. And together, with help from her dogs, the two manage to kill over 80 of them before driving off into the desert, where Sophia drops John off and they go their separate ways. John then begins his journey in hopes of reaching the Elder, which continues on for hours and hours through the night and into the morning, until he eventually collapses to the ground and is found unconscious by the Elder's men, who take John to meet with him. And once John regains consciousness, the Elder asks to know why he continues to fight so hard for his life. So John explains that he lives so he can remember his life with Helen. The Elder claims he could give him one more chance to earn a life, although not as a free man, but bound to the High Table, if he kills Winston for them, as he's refused to step down as the Continental's manager. And John ultimately accepts the mission, severing his ring finger and giving the Elder his wedding ring as a show of fealty. He then returns to New York, where he's promptly met and attacked by Zero and his men on motorcycles, but he manages to take each of them out except for Zero, who continues to follow John all the way to the Continental's doorstep, where his attempt to kill him is interrupted by Sharon, forcing them to stop their fighting as they're now on Continental grounds. Sharon then takes John to meet with Winston, who's aware of why he's here, and he offers John a choice, either to sell his soul and ultimately die as a servant of the High Table, or die as a man Helen would have approved of. And John chooses the latter option, prompting the adjudicator upon entering and learning of his decision to make a call to the administration and have the New York Continental deconsecrated, meaning all business can now be conducted on Continental grounds. So with the High Table's emissaries on their way, John and Sharon load up on firearms, which they then use to kill the 45 soldiers before John's again forced to shift his attention to Zero and his subordinates, 6 of whom he's able to fight his way through before engaging in a back and forth sword fight with Zero, that John ultimately wins after stabbing Zero through the chest. With John having defeated everyone the adjudicator's thrown his way, she's prompted to suggest a parley, and meets with Winston, Sharon, and John on the hotel's rooftop to negotiate, where they eventually agree to allow Winston to keep his power after he repledges his fealty to the High Table. John, though, doesn't get as great of a deal, as the others decide he still has to die, so Winston fires at him multiple times, which sends him falling off the roof and down to the ground below, presumably killing him. So with him seemingly dealt with, the adjudicator has the New York Continental reconsecrated. They soon realize that John Wick may still be a problem though, upon noticing he's somehow no longer where he'd landed, which is thanks to the Bowery King, who'd had his men pick him up and bring him to their new hideout so he can explain his plans of going to war with the High Table to him, in hopes that John will fight by his side. And that was everything you needed to know before watching John Wick 4. If you enjoyed the video, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And also let us know in the comments below which John Wick film is your favorite. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.